Hello and welcome to the Patty Pod. It is April 16th, 2023. It has been a little while since our last podcast episode. I was a little bit busy, and I think as I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of moving more into the semi-weekly format as listed, at least on Apple Podcasts. And a lot happened. Boy, a lot has happened since, I think it was March 21st, the last time an episode was released. I guess I'll start off with the theme that sort of emerged in the last couple of weeks, and that is cuts. Cuts is the theme, or at least a theme of this episode. I went to the hat store. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I went to JJ's hat store, and I got the news from the fellas there that they were going to be able to cut my brim, which was big news for me. I've told this story a lot on the podcast about my search for cool hats, and especially for the Bolero, which is kind of sort of a modified, or it's like a version of a cowboy hat, but it's got a flat brim and it's got just a round crown. So it's a little bit of a mix between a cowboy hat and a fedora, I guess. But I bought one a while ago, and the brim was quite big. And I guess I was okay with it. I wore it around a little bit, but it was just a little bit too big for me to wear kind of in a more casual setting. So I decided to get it cut. I was wondering if Kate wasn't a big fan, and I was always wondering if I was taking her opinion too much into account on this one. But after giving it a lot of thought, I decided that no, it would be a little bit better with a smaller brim. So as I shared in the last episode, I was pretty stoked to find out that they could cut a brim. I didn't know they could do that. I sort of just asked on a whim, because I didn't know if they'd be able to, figure out how to open up the material on the outside and then cut the actual brim and then close it again. But the hat doctor at the JJ Hat Center was able to do it. So, and just a little bit about going to that store. When I went there, it was it's really this classic old store. It's in Midtown Manhattan, and it's got this, it's got like chandeliers. There's a lot of gold trim, not like really gaudy, but just little gold trim touches around like frames, around picture frames and stuff. They have a bunch of old hat ads or old posters for hats, lining the store, and they have these little gold trim around their frames. There's a lot of woodwork in the store. And that means there's a lot of kind of tan color and burgundy colors, a lot of woodwork throughout. The walls are mainly wood, and they have a couple of wingback leather chairs in the front when you first walk in. They kind of are facing each other, like where you could sit and wait or have a little conversation. It's great. It's this great old store. They have a little upstairs, stairs behind the main counter. They go up to this balcony that kind of runs the length of the store, that kind of overlooks the whole store. And then if you walk down that balcony, leads to this front office that's on the second floor. That has these windows that kind of look over the first floor. So I don't know, that all gives it this old school feeling. For me, I love those kinds of places. And it was, it's also kind of cozy. It's, I think, part of why I like old school stores and just, spaces in general. Not just because they're different, but they also seem warmer, more inviting. And this place definitely seems like it. So if you're in New York, give it a shot. Even if you're not going to buy a hat, just poke your head in, and I think you'll enjoy it. So I had talked with the guy originally about doing this. I think I in the last episode I learned from one man that was working there that I should come back the next week, and then I should call ahead and ask for this guy named Jose, and I should deal with him about bringing my hat in. So I did. I found Jose. He was a nattily attired man, very neatly and fancifully groomed. He had kind of a short beard, and then he had a bit of a handlebar mustache. And, he was, when I found him, he sort of, as I told him the conversation I had had the week before, we had a very careful conversation with me, a very careful inquiry about exactly what I wanted and and what would happen. So he brought me over to this menu of different things that I could have done, and he explained very carefully, what I was asking for, what that sort of fell under in their categories, how much it would cost me, and so on. He was very clear to me that, they don't necessarily cut really short if they feel like it's going to ruin the integrity of the hat. They won't cut it shorter than it should be cut, even if the customer wants that. And I said, I understand. And, he's saying to me, it's very clear that this was going to be, that I was going to get what I was going to get, and there's no going back on it. And I was very clear about that. And, so you could tell that any kind of hat alteration was kind of a nuanced affair, and that they obviously had dealt with some, shall we say, particular people in the past. I could tell by how, specific he was being and how careful he was being in his explanations of everything. And then at the very end, he said to me, well, we have a lot of work ahead of us, as opposed to, the milliner has a lot of work ahead of him, or the hat doctor has a lot of work ahead of him. He said, we have a lot of work ahead of us, as if, he was an actual doctor, conveying to me, the patient, that, it wasn't just going to be a significant undertaking for the doctor, but it was going to be a significant undertaking for myself, as if I was, as if I was going to be cut, and I was going to have to prepare myself for the long road ahead. So that was the hat doctor. That was hilarious. That was fun. The reason why cut is emerging in themes, because I was cut. I did have a little surgery myself. It was on April, what was it? It was right before I left on my trip. And it's the 16th today, so that would have made it the 1st of April. I'm sorry, the 31st of March. So on the 31st of March, it was a Friday, I had this little bump removed from my leg. And I had this bump for, at first just sort of emerged, and it was kind of big. And it was just this weird, hard, little bump right above my knee. And I went to the doctor right away, and he was like, it's nothing, it's benign, we can try to freeze it off. And so I said, yeah, okay, let's freeze it off. And so he sprayed this stuff on it, and it was kind of cold, and, I was supposed to wait a few days, and nothing happened. He was like, it might not, I was like, all right. So then I just sort of lived with it, and I don't know, I thought maybe it would fall off on its own at some point. I thought maybe it was stress related or something. And I don't know, I just didn't want to get around to doing it, I guess. But eventually I was like, I don't like the way it looks. It's kind of ugly. So I thought, this year I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And I don't know, I think I thought I wanted to do it before the summer so that I could wear my shorts in the summer and it would be all healed and whatever. So I decided to do it. I was going to do it in the beginning of March, but then I realized I wasn't going to be able to play hockey soon thereafter. I think they maybe told me that. So then I decided, all right, I'm going to do it right before this 2-week trip to Europe that we had planned. That way I can heal on the trip. And some people thought it was kind of a little risky or something like that. And I was a little bit unsure about it, but I called them before I booked it, and I was like, would there be any problem with me flying with this? And they're like, no. So I had it done. The doctor was like, you're not worried about, you're okay with this? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm just going to be walking around. And he was like, all right. So I had that done. And they did want to get it tested, send it to a lab. After the surgery, the doctor said, man, it's probably not a big deal, but we'll do that anyways. So, I actually still haven't heard because I was away. But I did leave a message and somebody was like, yeah, just call us when you have a chance. So I'm assuming it's not a big deal, but in any case, I'll find out soon. So yeah, I was going to, have to sit out a couple weeks of hockey, but I think I've felt pretty good about my plan here because, it's about a 2-week period where the doctor was like, you can't play hockey, you can't, I can't go biking, he didn't even want me to jog. So that's tough. And luckily it lined up. I did it on Friday night, and we left on Tuesday. So, and I was like, this is perfect. I'm gonna have, it gave me a couple of days to get used to taking care of the incision site, which was a matter of just washing it and, using a little hydrogen peroxide at first, and then just covering it with putting Neosporin on and just bandaging it up. So, and then we left. So it did work out. That was the plan, but I got a curveball because that happened Friday night. Friday night I felt a little bit off. I had a little bit of a toothache to the point where I took some ibuprofen, which I rarely do, and I went to bed, and then I woke up the next day and it started feeling a little bit worse and worse and worse. And I had this pain in my molar for a while. I remember having it back in December, and then just kind of went away. So I thought, whatever. It's maybe the beginning of a cavity that somehow I was able to go away with my excellent brushing and flossing routine. And but anyway, throughout the day on Saturday, it got worse and worse and worse. And by Saturday night, it was pretty clear to me that it was the problem. So then I'm thinking, oh shit, what am I gonna do here? So I went to bed on Saturday. Sunday, I woke up and I was in a lot of pain, and I was like, I've got to take care of this today. So I started trying to find a dentist that was open on a Sunday. And mind you, I'm supposed to be leaving for Europe on Tuesday. So I'm calling around, I'm asking friends. I put out a message in my 2 different hockey group chats with lots of people in it. Eventually I found a place that was open and that listed that they had an endodontist, which is what I was looking for, because I don't know why, I just thought this might need a root canal, because this is the kind of pain I had before when I had a previous root canal. And it was so effective, the root canal, that I just wanted that again. I just wanted to not mess around with anything else, just do the root canal and get it over with and be done with the pain. So I went to this place that said they did emergency dental care, and they listed that they had endodontists in their practice, and I thought, great. So we were there. I had this I was really in pain. I was I wasn't passing out or anything, but I got an ice pack and I put it on my face, and that was the only thing that made it feel better. And we went to the dentist, and Kate came with me. We took the subway. It was in Manhattan, the only place that we could find that was open. So we went. It was on Central Park West. They kind of tested it a little bit. We didn't even know what tooth was really the problem, because the 2 back molars on the right side hurt. And I was like, I'm supposed to go to Europe on Tuesday. And this woman, the dentist, was like, well, we can give you some antibiotics, and we'll give you a lot of painkillers. And I was like, okay. And so she's like, if the antibiotics work, we'll know they can work within 24 hours. And if that's the case, then you can go and you'll just be on this antibiotics. And I was like, okay. So I start, and they gave me they were like, take this. I'm like, do you have anything you can give me right now? And they were like, just take, I think they said four Advil and 2 extra strength Tylenol, which is this huge mouthful of pills, which I normally don't take. And I did, and I started feeling better, and I was like, oh, thank God. So by the time I came back to the house on Sunday, I felt better. I was able to eat and stuff. But then it started like after a while the pain meds wore off, and then I was like in a lot of pain again. So on Monday, I'm just like I have to find somebody. So I called my old dentist because I couldn't find the endodontist that I had originally gone to. I really tried. I looked through all my email and stuff. I couldn't find him. So I was able to find the dentist that I thought referred me to him, and they gave me another referral. So I just went to this place. And I mean, when I called in the morning, I described what was going on to the receptionist, and she was like, I'm like, I'm supposed to fly tomorrow. And she's like, well, why don't you just come in and see what the doctor says? We can fit you in at the end of the day. I'm like, okay, great. So I go and I speak to the endodontist, and he's just like, well, he's like, what tooth is it? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, I can't tell from the x-rays. We're going to have to test it. And I'm like, all right. So we do these I'm like, do we have to? Like, I did all this yesterday. And he's like, yeah, we have to. And I'm like, all right. So like they put this gel on for cold. They do some kind of thing for heat. And I'm just like, oh God, like, I've been in a lot of pain for the last couple of days at this point, and already gone through the testing thing, which is not the most fun. And, we did this bite test, and eventually that seemed to indicate which one it was. And, at first the endodontist was like, you may not, I know I might not be able to go on the trip. He's like, yeah, that's the way to think about it. I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's like, well, we'll see what we can do. So he got in there. Once we figured, we were pretty confident which tooth it was. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, there's a bunch of basically infected pulp here. And I could smell it. It was odd. It was like, because it gets infected, it starts to stink a little bit. Of course, you can't smell it when your regular tooth is intact. But as they drill down, then that infected stuff gets drilled out. So he was like, yeah, he's like, this happens, I just actually had one myself, and the same thing happened. I could smell some of the infected material. And, but after like we got through it, he's like, I think we got it all. And he's like, you should be able to go on your trip. If you feel okay in the morning, then you should be able to go. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing if that happens. So I was like, okay, thank you. And, after the Novocaine wore off, I really didn't feel any pain. And he had given me some ibuprofen to take, and I didn't take any of it. And I woke up the next morning and I felt fine. And he called me. He's a super nice guy. He like, gave me his cell phone number and stuff. And he had called me in the morning, and I was like, I feel fine. And he's like, all right, that's great. And he's like, I think you're good to go. And I was like, that's awesome. So yeah, so I was able to go. So we left Tuesday night. So that was the third cut. The first cut was the hat. The second cut was the leg bump, and the third cut was into my tooth, and that was pretty wild. On Monday morning, I was in a lot of pain and kind of convinced that I wasn't going to be able to go on this trip. By Monday evening, when I first started talking to the endodontist, it sort of seemed like it wasn't going to happen either. 2 hours later, I was looking like I was going to go. So, and then the next day I went. So that was a crazy turn of events. I was all kind of worn out from I didn't sleep real well on Saturday night, Sunday night, and Monday night. And then, but, I was super grateful because we got to go, and it was an amazing trip. Well, maybe we'll talk about it more in another episode, but I'll just give you the quick recap. We flew into Vienna. We flew like overnight Tuesday night, so we got there in the morning, and finally got our way to the Airbnb, and we couldn't check in right away, so we went and had lunch at this little feminist cafe, and then we eventually checked in. Then we walked around, and there was this noted architect named Otto Wagner, and we were able to see a few of his buildings, and then we went and had dinner and came back. The next day we went out to the Schönbrunn Palace, which was the summer palace of the Habsburgs, of Maria Theresa and Franz Josef in particular. This grand palace, it sort of looks like Versailles or the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. If you've seen pictures or know those places, but especially was sort of notable to me was the grounds were quite magnificent. These massive grounds behind the main building. They had, there was like a this big aviary, I think it was called. It looked like a giant bird cage where they kept, I think it was doves. They still keep them there. Um, and I guess they had some other animals on the property that we didn't see. But they have this thing called the Gloriette, which is this giant, it looks like just like a monument, but it's so big it actually has a little restaurant in the inside. And you can see it it's up on this big hill at the back of the grounds. So you can see it out the windows of the main palace, which is it's pretty magnificent. And it's so big, it's striking off in the distance. So we did that, and then came back into town, and we had dinner at this kind of this sort of very modern kind of hipstery place that reminded me a lot of something you'd find in Brooklyn. They had kind of I don't know, new, interesting, creative dishes. I had a halloumi sandwich, halloumi cheese, I believe it is, and it was good. It was fun. So we did that the next day, or actually, I think that was the first day that we went to Erich, sorry, or Erich, I suppose it would be called in German. The second day after Schönbrunn, we went to the Belvedere Palace, which was more like the in-city palace, the regular palace for the Habsburgs. There's an upper and a lower, and we went to the upper palace, and that was, toured sort of the staterooms and whatnot, where they had receptions and some of the other fancy rooms, and then they had an art gallery there where we got to see all these Klimt paintings, which were quite remarkable. I'm not a huge Klimt person, but I've learned to appreciate him more actually over the years. And before we went on the trip, I kind of viewed some videos of just about Vienna sites, and that popped up. His work popped up, so I was like, oh yeah, I do want to see some of his lesser known pieces. But the stuff we saw the Kiss, which is the big draw, but there are some other masterpieces of his in that museum that are really brilliant. They just blur the line between abstraction and representation. And, he has almost this pointillism kind of technique. And it's beautiful because it's almost like a pattern. He did this painting of kind of a country building, and there were all these trees in the foreground, and it almost looked like a quilt or something. It was so, it had such this pattern that he used. And it was beautiful. It was like one of my favorite things that I've seen in a while. So that was fun. I'm forgetting where we went. That night we found a little Turkish place in our neighborhood. We stayed in this cool neighborhood. It reminded me kind of maybe Williamsburg or the East Village in New York, kind of an artsy neighborhood, a little bit younger. A lot of vegan restaurants, which surprised me. A ton of vegan and vegetarian restaurants, at least in that neighborhood. And one of the servers told me that, it was a little bit more in that neighborhood that you'd find that, but that you can find a lot of that throughout Vienna, which surprised me a lot because I thought it was going to be really conservative, lots of classical music and, I don't know, bankers or something. I just thought it was going to be more of a conservative culture. And so that was cool. We also then the next day we went to the Mozart house, which was awesome. Interesting, small kind of little space, but it's sort of like in New York. If you have that much space, you are, doing pretty well. The building was a couple of floors, and there was just a ton of information about Mozart and his life in Vienna. And he composed some of his most famous pieces in those rooms. So that was kind of wild to think about, him being in these little rooms composing these masterpieces that have been, loved for centuries. Some of which I really like, and so that was fun. That was the Mozart house. And then we went out to the graveyard, the main graveyard of the area of Vienna. I wanted to see Brahms's grave in particular. I love Brahms. I sang a couple of his pieces when I was in college, and my conductor Loved Brahms too. We did the Brahms A German Requiem, which is this big, massive piece for orchestra and choirs, and we it was a big, major undertaking, and I was always I love the piece. I play the fifth movement, especially if I'm having a hard time. It's really just beautiful. It's very, it's just like really cathartic and comforting. And anyway, I loved doing the piece. It was one of the best experiences I had in my life because it was over, I don't know, weeks or months that we were rehearsing it, and then we performed it. And I was always really grateful to my conductor, Peter, who picked that work and took on that big challenge. And I loved the programming that he did in general. He always had a great ear for great music and introduced me to a lot of it, and he loved Brahms himself. And Peter had this print of a painting in his office of Brahms at the piano with a big cigar in his mouth and playing away joyfully. And so I thought it'd be a good tribute to. I bought a cigar and I bought some flowers, and we went out to that grave, and I laid them at Brahms's grave as a tribute to Brahms and to Peter more specifically. So that was a good moment for me. I think I've talked about Peter a little bit before, but rest in peace, Peter. One more time, love you, and I trust you're doing well. And so next to Brahms's grave was the graves of Mozart and Beethoven and Strauss, and so that was kind of cool to see all of those major figures in classical music all in one little spot there in the graveyard. So we did that, and then we went back into the main part of the city, which is called the Innenstadt, and it's all sort of focused around St. Stephen's Church and the Stephensplatz Plaza. So we walked around a bit, and later on, at one point, we went to this Wittgenstein house. Wittgenstein was a philosopher, famous philosopher. I studied a lot of him in college. I did a whole semester on one of his books, his famous philosophical investigations. And before he did that, he helped design a house for his sister in a very modern style in the 1920s. So it made me think, I don't know the timeline exactly of Bauhaus architecture, other kind of mid-century architecture, but it seemed to be pretty early in that progression. So I don't know if he was influenced by people or if he helped influence other people, maybe some of both, but we got to view the Wittgenstein house in Vienna, so that was super cool to see. And then we kind of wrapped it up on Friday night. We went to a concert at the Musikverein, which is the main concert hall. I believe that's where the Vienna Philharmonic plays, which is known to be one of the best orchestras in the world. They weren't playing during our time there, so we caught another concert, a chamber group that was really good. They played a Haydn piece, and then they played Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which I never really listened to a ton of, but certainly knew, and it was nice to listen to it again. It's a good piece, and especially when you hear it live with a really excellent chamber orchestra. So that was fun. Being in the hall was amazing. It's an ornate hall. It's so historic. They had a bust of Brahms. We were actually in the Brahms Hall part of the building, not the main hall. So I got to take my picture with that, and that was fun. And then we moved on to we went to the Secession building the next day, amongst some other things, and we got to see some of the work of Klimt, some more of his work. He did this big frieze that ran along the top of one of the walls in the basement that was originally a part of an exhibition that featured a sculpture of Beethoven that I think was by Rodin. So that sculpture wasn't in the building, but the frieze that was a part of that exhibition has been relocated, and the building itself is sort of a modernist masterpiece. So that was really cool to see. That was most of Vienna. There was a bunch of other stuff. Of course, we hit some of the coffee shops, the classic coffee shops that have this beautiful nouveau decor. and some stained glass windows, and some lovely coffee drinks. Had some great treats there as well. Had some crepes that were delicious. They really know how to do sweet things in Europe that don't overpower you. It had all this chocolate sauce and whipped cream on it, but it was, sort of lightly balanced, not overly sweet. So that was awesome. And yeah, that was basically Vienna. Then we moved on to Slovenia, and Slovenia was pretty amazing. We went to the capital, Ljubljana, when we first got there. It's this quaint little capital. It's got this small little old city that's cobblestone streets and old buildings, and they have this triple bridge, which is got this kind of Venetian-looking architecture with these columns. And then they have down the way a little bit the dragon bridge with these beautiful these bronze dragon sculptures. That's kind of the center of their town. And then just up from those bridges is the castle up on the hill. And we got to see all that. It's beautiful. They have this long kind of arcade-like structure that runs along the river where they have a bunch of shops and restaurants and things. We went and got these dumplings that were traditional Slovenian food. I had a savory, I'm trying to remember what the savory one was. It was, I think, some kind of a cheese one, which was good. And then I had this sweet pistachio dumpling that was really amazing. So that was fun. We then went up to Lake Bled the next day. And actually, in Ljubljana, we also got to their park. They have this massive park that is a little bit more formal at the front end of it, but then it opens up and is quite wild. It's almost like Prospect Park in Brooklyn, if not more wild. So that was really cool. Kind of reminded me of some of the parks in Portland, Oregon, actually, with its size and how wild it was. So we did a little bit of that. That was awesome to see how, they have this green space right in the center of town and so close to the old town. A beautiful spot. We went up to Lake Bled, which is this famous kind of alpine lake. It's a lake with, you can see the snow-capped mountains in the background, and they have this little church, this old church that's this beautiful building on an island in the middle of the lake. So we just kind of walked around. We got the famous Lake Bled cream cake, which was delicious. Hiked a little bit up to one of the viewing points, and then we just kind of chilled out, had a coffee, hung out. That was Lake Bled. And then we went to, the next day we went through the mountain area. We went up to an area called the Versus Pass, which was near the mountain, which I'm forgetting the name of. That's like the national symbol, Tegolvi, I think. I'll have to look that up. Which is in the center of this mountain range, but this Versus Pass goes right next to it. So we drove through there. There was all these windy little switchbacks, kind of scary driving, but worth it when you get to the top for the views and the landscape change. And then after that, we went to the Soka River Valley, and that's got this beautiful turquoise river that runs. It turns turquoise from the minerals in the water. It's got some World War I trenches and so on. So that was all pretty cool to see. And then finally we came down the next day to the wine country called Berta. We came down that day, I should say, after the hiking through the driving through the pass, hiking along the river, and then we drove down to this little town. And we just sort of hung out that night. It was nice to chill out, take in the scenery. We had these beautiful views of vineyards off the back of our Airbnb. We had this balcony off the back, and we just kind of hung out. On the way there, we stopped in this little mountain town. I forgot to mention that is actually where Hemingway wrote A Farewell to Arms. It was called Kobarid. Anyway, and then we ended up in the wine country, and we actually drove into Italy to look for a place to eat, but we ended up eating back by our home in Slovenia. And yeah, it was great. And we then the last day we made our way back towards Ljubljana, but we stopped at these caves, which were really incredible. they were like, you would go in, and it's called the Scotian Caves, and it was just sort of a narrow passageway at first, but then it started to open up, and you got into this big room that sort of looked like a cathedral with this really high ceiling and all these stalagmites and stalactites, and then but then as you go further, the next cavernous room that you walk into has got this, like, it's enormous, and it's this huge canyon beneath you, and it's this raging river at the bottom. It's just hundreds of meters down, and it's nuts because you can just, it's so steep, and the path was like very curvy. It had a guardrail, a handrail the whole way, but the paths are kind of wet because there's, water dripping down, and it wasn't slippery, but I had a little moment of fear of heights, but it was absolutely spectacular. And I don't know if I've ever seen a raging underground river, and it just had these little lights illuminating it. It looked like the bank vaults in Harry Potter, where they have to go underground, or something from Indiana Jones. Anyway, it was spectacular. So we spent a while in those caves on this tour, and then we emerged. I forgot to mention, we stopped at this little Mediterranean town on the way out, called Piran. So that was after the wine country, and that was just this beautiful little town with this beautiful town square, and another old town, all these little homes packed in, and had all these beautiful views of the Mediterranean. Had another kind of hillside, and had these big, like, old city walls that you could walk on the top of the hill, and you just got these gorgeous views of the whole city and of the Mediterranean, and it was kind of misty out, so you couldn't see where the horizon, met the water, and I love that. That was amazing. So that was Piran and the caves, and then we finally made our way back to Ljubljana, did a little more walking around, and then had dinner at this awesome Michelin-starred restaurant that was a tasting menu. Normally I don't love tasting menus, but because it's usually not that filling, and it's always pricey, but I had eaten enough right before we went so that I wasn't starving. So I recommend that if you're ever going to do something like that, eat right before you go, because it's always not a lot of food. It's really tasty what you get, but it's not a lot. But this place was good. They did this kind of like, I don't know, elaborate dish with cauliflower and broccoli, and then they did one with, for me, with asparagus and a risotto, and just a lot of different interesting sauces and foams and flavors going on. So that was cool, and it was all in the Archer's Tower of the old castle. So it was like this curved, almost like this like circular tower, and it's all stone, and they did this really beautiful mural on the side that kind of depicted animals, and it had a kind of a medieval scene. So that was amazing. That was wonderful. And that was kind of the end. And then we came back. So that's the trip in a nutshell. Maybe I'll talk more about some of the things that really stood out to me, or certain moments that I had. But yeah, that was it. It was a whirlwind. I'm back now in New York. It was good to come home a couple days before the work week started, and it's good to be back, and it was a wonderful time. All right, I hope everyone's doing well, and we'll talk soon. Peace and love.